Coming up on this episode, the Warriors have one final tune-up ahead of the regular season. I'll tell you what I think the Warrior rotation should look like in Friday's game against the Lakers, plus the potential roster moves we could see immediately after that game, and the latest on potential contract extensions for Jonathan Kuminga and Moses Moody. Welcome back to the Golden State with Mates podcast. Hope you're all having a good week. Before I get started, I just wanted to give a massive shout out to all you guys again for the ongoing support. This is episode 146 of the podcast, dating back over a year now. And I'm grateful to say that this is the first time that I've been able to monetize the podcast via the YouTube channel with over 1,000 subscribers. And it couldn't have been done without you guys, so much appreciated again. And all it means is that I'm more motivated than ever to produce Warriors content for you and create these podcasts for you regularly as the season develops. Let's get into it though. And the Warriors, they've got their final preseason game against the Lakers on Friday at Chase Center. It's probably going to be a full dress rehearsal. You'd imagine. Steve has already said that everyone practiced in full earlier today, including DeAnthony Melton, who had that slight back concern that saw him miss Tuesday's game, and also Brandon Pajemski as well, who's got that broken nose and he'll wear a mask. So the Warriors are in a great situation, while there's other teams like the Clippers who are going to be indefinitely without Kawhi Leonard. The Thunder have just lost Isaiah Hartenstein for 5-6 weeks. Touch wood, the Warriors are in an unbelievable health position with basically everyone available now, having seen Andrew Wiggins come back on Tuesday, and now Melton and Pajemski back for this final game against the Lakers. So unbelievable position to be in, but obviously making the job all the more difficult for Steve Kerr in terms of the Golden State rotation and what it will look like for Friday's game. And I'm assuming that will give us a fairly good picture of what it will look like in the opening regular season game against the Portland Trail Blazers next week. Now, let's have a look at what I think the Warrior rotation should look like. And I'm going to work backwards here because I think that's actually a little bit easier. The first thing we need to work out is who's actually going to miss out in terms of the Warrior rotation. And it's funny because I published an article earlier today for Blue Man Hoop looking at the 3 winners and the 3 losers of the preseason so far through the first 5 games. And I had, as the winners, Moses Moody, obviously, doesn't need to be explained. Jonathan Kuminga was my other winner. Now, we've kind of had the full JK experience. I've spoken a lot about that. We got the full JK experience in the Laker game on Tuesday as well. A lot of good, a lot of not so good stuff. But I think for JK going into preseason, the biggest focus was, okay, can you convince Steve that you are capable of playing at small forward? And with the improved jump shot, having shot 47.6% from three-point range in preseason, I think he's done that. And therefore, regardless of the other concerns, that is a massive win for him and for the team to showcase to Steve that he can play at small forward. So I see him as a winner. And then Lindy Waters the third as well, who I'll get into in a second here, but I also see him as a major winner, having proved himself as a genuine rotation option throughout preseason. And the losers were much more difficult because you look across the roster. Sorry, I'm really struggling at the moment. You look across the roster and you actually, who's had a bad preseason? Who's had a disappointing preseason relative to expectations? Now, I think you got to put Wiggs in there just because of the illness, putting him out for the first 4 games, coming back for the 5th game against the Lakers on Tuesday, which he got better as the game wore on, and I think there's encouraging signs, and I'm not overly concerned with Wiggs moving forward, but I think just the fact that he missed the first 4 games, he'd have to be included in that. And then the other one I probably had was GP2, who I just don't think has done enough. He's been solid. He was really good on Tuesday, but I don't think he's done enough compared to the other options that are kind of vying for those minutes off the bench, particularly at the 2 and 3 positions, like a Moses Moody, a Buddy Hield, these types. So he was my other one, albeit he's been okay. And what I should say as well is it's just great to see GP2 out there healthy, looking like himself and being on the floor, because we know the injury issues that he's had over the last couple of years. And the other loser I had, which a bit harsh maybe, but Quentin Post, kind of said on media day that he wanted to crack the Warrior rotation this season. He looks a long way off it on both ends of the floor. He's like 2 of 12 from the floor, shooting wise. He's been not great defensively. He hasn't had an assist, few turnovers. Just doesn't look great. Doesn't look like a rotation player this season, which is a little bit disappointing because I had some expectation of like, okay, he's a 5-year college prospect. He's 24 years old. I do think that TJD has probably done him a disservice a little bit by TJD being an older rookie last season, being so impactful and potentially being a starter at the start of this season as well. I think that's probably put a bit of unfair expectation on Quinton Post heading into his own rookie year, but we'll wait and see what he can do in the G League. But basically, my whole point is it's very difficult to point out any losers or anyone that's been disappointing throughout the preseason so far. But I think GP2 is one of them, and therefore, when I'm looking at, okay, who's missing out in the rotation, which is now fully healthy, I think he's got to be one of them. I've spoke about preseason. I think he's a plug in case of emergency, break glass in case of emergency, opposing guard going off, put him in there for 5 minutes, let him have a real crack at trying to guard him and providing some real pressure and intensity on the defensive end. But otherwise, I just don't see him as a mainstay of a healthy Warrior rotation right now. And as impressive as he's been, as much as I had him as a winner of the preseason, I just don't see Lindy Waters getting past anyone. It's very easy to say, well, Lindy Waters has shot nearly 50% from 3 on reasonable volume. He's been like the Warriors' 5th leading scorer or something. I think he's 3rd in rebounds, total rebounds, and he's also like 3rd in plus minus as well. So there's all these great things going for Lindy Waters III, but I'm still like, well, he's not playing over Moody. He's not playing over Buddy Hield. He's not playing over Melton. Like, where do the minutes come from? And they just can't come from anyone. And so I think it's those 2 guys and obviously Guy Santos as well as the 14th guy. Those 3 are out of the mix for me in terms of the rotation right now. Now, could Payton and Waters work their way back in or be great contributors if and when they get their opportunity? Absolutely. But I think right now you've got to make some tough calls, and I think those 2 are automatically out. That leaves 11. This is where it gets complicated for me. Leaving GP2 and Waters out, that's fine kind of thing. That's easy, I think. This is where it gets complicated because this is where the starting lineup and the bench unit really overlap a little bit and obviously contribute to each other. So if the Warriors want to continue with this starting lineup that we saw on Tuesday with Steph, Wiggs, JK, Draymond, and TJD, I'm really interested to see what they do with the bench and what they do with Loon, because I think if you are just going and saying, okay, we're just going to play our 10 best players, then I think Loon would be the 11th in that, or Loon would be out of the mix in that. And your top 10 would be those 5 guys I just stated, and then Pods, Melton, Hield, Moody, and Kyle Anderson. That would be your 10 to me. I think that's the 10 best players the Warriors can put out on the floor. But of course, it's not about just the best players. It's about the best combination, the best lineups. And I do wonder how, if Steve is going to start Draymond and TJD together, does that mean you automatically have to play Loon as well as that backup big? Or can you try and split the minutes where, those guys play the first 5 minutes together and then one of them comes off, then they come back in for the other as a 5, whether it be Draymond as a small ball option or Draymond, TJD coming off, Draymond being a small ball option kind of midway through the first quarter to the end of the first quarter, TJD comes back in, start the second. I don't know. There's so many different things you could do with that. I do find it difficult to see Steve benching Loon completely, and I wouldn't be surprised to start like in Friday's game against the Lakers and in the season opener against the Trailblazers, and perhaps for the first couple of games. We know, I feel like in seasons past, Steve has wanted to get as many guys as possible out there early in the season just to give them some run and then kind of work his way back. And that's why I wonder if he might actually start with an 11-man rotation, which seems excessive, but I do think, okay, maybe Loon plays 5 minutes each half. Maybe he plays 10 minutes and as your kind of 11th man, And that means that, you've got a third big out there rather than, having to rely solely on Draymond and TJD. Do you go to Kyle Anderson for some small ball center minutes? That's the other option that you could do. Like, do that for, 5 minutes a half, 5 minutes for the game. I don't know. I suppose the real question comes down to how many minutes do you want Draymond to play at center? Now, I've thought maybe 18 would be my max. Now, that leaves 30 minutes at center. Is TJD going to average 30 minutes? I don't think so. And therefore, he could be 25, 26, but where does that other 5 minutes come from? There's just still so many questions for Steve that we're going to get some answers to tomorrow against the Lakers, and then obviously the complete answers in the regular season opener against the Trailblazers. And it's going to be a rolling thing. It's not going to be one complete answer and that's it. It's going to be rolling, dependent on performance, depending on injury and health. But I do think like that center rotation is really interesting because that's going to kind of define where the Warriors go elsewhere as well. Because if Loon is your 11th man and he's playing 10 minutes, then that's, going to take some minutes off. Like, how many is Kyle Anderson going to play? How many is Moses going to play? I'm really interested if they do go with this starting lineup, then how does Steve split the minutes for Pods, Melton, Hield, and Moody all coming off the bench? Now, even if we want to take Pods out of the equation, then because he's a backup point guard, he's the primary ball handler off the bench, and he's kind of in a position of his own. But those other guys, Melton, Buddy Hield, Moses Moody, all similar-ish positions at the 2 and the 3. How do you split those minutes? How do you work that out where those guys, because really their preseason form would all dictate that they deserve 20 minutes a game. But I don't know how you can play all three guys for 20 plus minutes off the bench. I don't think you can. Now, Wiggins is probably, you'd imagine, only going to play 20 minutes and he'll be ramping up. But how much does Kuminga play? Does he play 30 plus minutes? Draymond, obviously, I think you're going to have to try. I think they should really look after Draymond this season. I wouldn't be pushing Draymond over 30 minutes a game. I'd be trying to keep him high 20s because this roster is built to withstand almost any injury concern or health concern outside Steph and probably Draymond as well, just because of the impact he has defensively. But outside of those two guys, I don't think there's a roster around the NBA that is as well built to cover the third best player and beyond. Because, I'm thinking about DeAnthony Melton and the slight back concern that he had, and waking up with a tight back and missing Tuesday's game against the Lakers. If that's a bit of a concern, and the Warriors have got to be pretty cautious with that going forward, and he misses some games here and there, that's disappointing, no doubt, because he's had a great preseason, and I'm looking forward to seeing him play. But the other part of me is just like, oh, cool, those minutes go to Moses. And do we have, would fans have an issue with that? No. In fact, fans are probably going to more have an issue with there being a full rotation and Moses is out of the picture again and he's only playing 15 minutes. So, I don't know. It's fascinating. I do think, though, that the starting five should be persisted with Steph, Wiggs, JK, Draymond, and TJD, because as I said on last episode, that's the highest upside group, I think, that the Warriors have. And I think that's what they've got to try. They've got to persist with that because they've got to try and unlock that, because I think that's their best pathway right now as the roster is currently constructed. I think that's the best pathway to trying to be a contender in the West, or a playoff team first and foremost, and then a team that could win a couple of rounds, potentially get to the Western Conference Finals. I think that's their best chance. Now, I've seen a lot of people in the YouTube comments discuss other options. I know Moses is a big candidate for a starting role, according to many of you. Sorry, it's early morning here, 9 o'clock, and I'm struggling. Moses is a big candidate, according to many of you in the YouTube comments, which I can understand if you're basing it purely on preseason form. He has been the most impressive Warriors player, leading the team in scoring in individual games 3 of the last 4, shooting 43.3% from three-point range, showing some stuff from the mid-range, getting to the basket. Defense has been okay. We know he's capable of all the hustle plays. He'll work his butt off for you. I love Moses, and I do think he should be playing 20 plus minutes, but I do think that the most high upside group is the one I just mentioned and the one that has to be persisted with, at least for the time being. And then you can make changes around that, whether it's getting another two guard in, like sliding Wiggs back to the three, what that does to Kuminga. Do you take Kuminga out or do you take TJD out, play Draymond as a small ball center? Like, I think there's going to be a lot of changes this season, and I don't particularly like that. One of the big things for me is continuity and consistency, and I think Steve needs to try and bed down a starting five, which every player gets on the bus to go to the game and knows exactly what their role is, right? This is the starting five. I'm starting or I'm not starting. If I'm coming off the bench, I know I'm playing 15, 20 minutes. Now, yes, there's got to be wiggle room depending on the opponent, depending on the performance at the time, like what guys are in form, what guys aren't, that kind of thing. There's got to be some wiggle room. But I do think if you look at the best teams over the past few seasons, if you look at the Celtics last season, the Thunder last season, the Mavericks last season, albeit they made a couple of trades mid-season, like the continuity, it's always like, this is our starting lineup. This is our sixth man. This is our seventh man. It's all very defined and players have roles. And that's the issue, is the Warriors' depth is unbelievable. And it's been showcased in preseason and it's been showcased as a major strength in preseason. But it could become a real issue when, Moses Moody's playing 25 minutes one game and then he's playing 5 minutes the next. And fans are like, hey, hang on, what's going on? And Moses himself would be like, hey, what's going on? I think the Warriors need to try and bed down something in terms of a guaranteed starting five and bench roles that are pretty clearly defined. And so that's going to be the most interesting thing for me entering the regular season and across the first couple of weeks, is that how much chopping and changing is going on, because I think too much of that is going to be a detriment to the team and detriment to individual players and their confidence levels and therefore their form and production. So very fascinated to see what the rotation looks like in this final preseason game against the Lakers and then moving forward to the regular season opener. Just a couple of roster moves we could see after tomorrow's game. Now, obviously, going back to last season, we had a heap of guys waived within hours, like a couple of hours after the final preseason game. I think that was against the Spurs. We saw the likes of Rudy Gay was, I think, the most notable one waived because he was trying to push for a main roster spot. I think it's all pretty simple at the moment because we haven't really seen a lot of these young guys get too many minutes or do too much to impress, to put their hand up and say, I need to be on the roster or on a two-way contract. So really, it's down to Guy Santos and Kevin Knox for the 14th roster spot. The rotation so far in terms of when those guys have been coming on at the end of games, Guy's been coming on before Kevin Knox, and therefore, unless there's something across training camp and in the preseason in terms of training away from the on-court performance, I struggle to see how or why Kevin Knox should have gone past Guy Santos. As much as I was interested in Kevin Knox and seeing how he could go in this Warrior on this Warrior roster and in preseason, but we just haven't seen it. He hasn't had that much opportunity, and when he has, it's been okay, but nothing, he hasn't been a standout by any means. And so you'd imagine that they would just move on from Kevin Knox, say thanks but no thanks, and they'd waive him by pretty shortly after Friday's game against the Lakers, I'd imagine. So he's probably out of the mix. And then the other guys for two-way contracts, of course, and potentially on the main roster, but we think would be more so vying for two-way contracts. Obviously, the current two-way contracted players are Quentin Post, Reece Beekman, Pat Spencer. The other two guys to complete the 20-man roster is Blake Hinson and also Jackson Rowe. Again, I don't think that either of those two guys have done enough on-court-wise in preseason to suggest that they would be taking any of the two-way contracts off the other guys, which we've seen the Warriors flip before. If you go back 2 seasons now, where the Warriors, just before the start of the regular season, at the end of the preseason, they swapped out their two-way contracts. I think, Quindary Weatherspoon was on a two-way contract, and I think Lester was on a two-way contract as well. I think it was those two guys out, and they brought Anthony Lamb and Ty Jerome in on two-way contracts. So they have switched their two-way contracts late in the piece before. I don't think Hinson or Rowe would have done enough to warrant that. And yes, like Spencer, Beekman, Post, they haven't been overly impressive either. Haven't had too much opportunity. I spoke about Post before as being a little bit disappointing, but like I think you persist with those guys, and hopefully Jackson Rowe and Blake Hinson could both be a part of the Santa Cruz program in the G League. So that's what I'd imagine after the Lakers game. Kevin Knox gone, Blake Hinson gone, Jackson Rowe gone, leaving the Warrior roster at 17 with 14 on the main roster and 3 on two-way contracts. That's what I'd imagine. Now, just before we finish up here, a couple of latest updates on potential contract extensions for Jonathan Kuminga and Moses Moody. Now, this is huge. I don't know why I'm leaving this to the end of the episode. Should have led with this because this is actually really, really important. We have got, 4 days now until the extension deadline on October 21. So we're counting down the hours here. What's that? 96 hours? Probably about 100 hours now until the extension deadline. Couple of latest updates. First of all, Kuminga. Danny Emmerman of Mercury News, I think, reported earlier in the week, not close on a deal between the Warriors and Jonathan Kuminga. Of course, is he going to want the full max ultimately? 5 years, 224. If that's the case, there's going to be no deal done. There's no way the Warriors are going to pay that. Now, can there be some kind of agreement that I've spoken about all off-season that is around 150, 160 million over 5 years? It's around that $30 million a year mark, which is what we saw the Warriors give Jordan Poole. Now, I still think that would be a risk from a Warrior standpoint. Less of a risk for JK. Yes, he might be giving up $70 million, which is a lot, but when you're getting 150, 160, I mean, come on, it's still a lot of money. So less risk with JK. I think that would still be risky for the Warriors, and I'm not sure if Golden State would be willing to do that. I probably would. I do think there's something to be said for a bit of team morale and boost heading into the regular season with a couple of these contract extensions and getting them done. Now, we've seen it go the other way recently with Clay not getting an extension last season, albeit he was eligible for an extension the entire season. There was no deadline on it. And also the year before that, Jordan Poole and Wiggins got contract extensions, but it was a bit awkward because Draymond didn't. And so these two guys, Moody, Kuminga, how is this going to play out? I'd be surprised with Kuminga. From everything we've heard, I'd be surprised if he agreed to a deal here. Now, I'm happy to be proven wrong. And again, I would probably do a deal between 150, 160 million over 5 years. That's what I would do. I think the Warriors should be willing to do that. But I don't blame either party. Like, if I'm Jonathan Kuminga, I understand, like, you're looking at these other fellow top 10 picks from 2021 getting 5 years, 224. And it's not just about the money, but it's about you wanting to be viewed as a max player. And I can absolutely understand him wanting to be seen as such. And I think that in his head, he would rightfully think, hey, you just give me another full year, more opportunity, averaging nearly 30 minutes a game, starting role for the entire season. I'll show you I'm going to be a star in this league and I'm worth the max. So I can absolutely understand his point of view. And I also can understand the franchise being like, hang on, whoa, you are not yet as proven as those other guys. We're probably not so reliant on you as those other teams are. Like, Scotty Barnes is the face of the Toronto Raptors. Cade Cunningham is the face of the Detroit Pistons. Like, JK's not the face of the Warriors, and he won't be until such time as Steph Curry hangs him up and retires. Even when Steph's out of his prime, and you might argue that hopefully JK can become the Warriors' best player, but he won't ever be the face of the franchise until Steph retires, if JK is still around at that point. So I do see both sides and why it's just the reality of the situation. It's just the contrasting motives are both absolutely understandable, and it's just why I don't imagine a deal will get done. And I don't blame either party for that. It's just, as I said, the reality of the situation. Moses is a little bit different. We heard from Anthony Slater yesterday that there is a possible extension, that there's been talks between the Warriors and Moody's representatives on a new deal that would be around the mid-level exception for multiple years. Now, if there's one thing the Warriors need to do between now and next week, it's this. They need to bed down Moses Moody on a multi-year contract. The mid-level, we know D'Anthony Melton got 12. It was the mid-level, $12.8 million in free agency. I think the mid-level is expected to be about $13.5 million next year in free agency. So we're really talking about anywhere between $11 and $14 million a year here. That could be a steal for the Warriors. If I'm Moses, based on my preseason form, I'm not even sure if I'd do that. But from a Warriors standpoint, I'd be giving that contract offer over quick smart. And before we see a potential breakout year, because there's two outcomes with this. If he signs his contract, right? Let's say it's 3 years $40 million or 4 years $55 million. I think anything under 4 years, 60 would just be an absolute steal, right? Anything under $15 million a year, because the way money's going in the NBA, that's not much. And I can guarantee you, there's two outcomes here. One, Moses has a breakout year, looks like a guy who could actually be earning upwards of $20 million, and all of a sudden you've got a major steal on your books for the next 3 or 4 years. And that's a huge, huge win in the days of the luxury tax implications and the first and second apron and stuff. That's a huge win, right? And the Warriors have already got a couple of huge wins in the fact they've got TJD and Pods under contract for another 3 years on rookie deals. If they can do that with Moody, that's fantastic. Now, if he doesn't have the breakout year, if he replicates last season, he's kind of in and out of the rotation a bit, averages 16, 17 minutes a game, it doesn't fully, the preseason form doesn't fully translate, then I don't think there's downside even then. You're paying a guy $12 to $15 million to be a bit part player. It's not ideal, but I actually don't think it's that bad. I still think teams would come calling saying, yeah, we still think we can unearth, talent there and potential there with more consistent opportunity. And if you want to get off that contract, I don't think it would be that difficult. He's a young player. Surely he's bound to get better. We've already seen that in preseason. There is absolutely, to me, there's no risk in the Warriors giving Moses Moody a 3 or 4 year contract at 12, 11 to 14, 12 to $15 million a season. There is just no risk in that from a Warriors standpoint. For Moses, I think there is, because I think there's a chance he has a breakout year. And as Slater pointed out in his article, that could double his value. If he waits till restricted free agency, has a breakout year, he could get over $20 million a year, right? So there's a risk for him. And so, again, if I'm the franchise, I'm trying to get that contract signed by him quick smart, if it's going to be around the mid-level range, because that could prove an absolute steal for the Golden State Warriors. Other than that, guys, I'll finish it up there. Let me know if you've got any thoughts or opinions on the Warrior rotation, potential roster moves, what you'd be offering Jonathan Kuminga and Moses Moody in the final days here before the contract extension deadline. If you haven't subscribed to the YouTube channel already, that would be greatly appreciated. You can follow me at POK252. That's POK252 on X/Twitter. And other than that, I'll see you on the next episode, probably likely to be after Friday's game against the Lakers.